Our next speaker has something to do with this very nice large screen you see in front of you. He's the director of hardware development at Microsoft, where he leads a team developing Surface Hub. If you haven't heard of it, I've seen the videos and I'm pretty excited to learn more. He's been designing products and experiences that seek to change the world in ways little and big for over 25 years. He joined the technology pioneering startup Perceptive Pixel, also called PPI, in 2009, which was acquired by Microsoft in 2012. PPI introduced the world to multi-touch displays in Jeff Hand's TED Talk in 2006, long before the first iPhone was introduced. Peter's current work focuses on large-screen multi-touch display systems and their use to enhance group communication, remote collaboration, and big data analysis. He has been working in the projection display and LCD industry for over 20 years with companies including InFocus, Corning, and 3M. Peter holds a BS in mechanical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I don't know if I said that right.
Close enough.
All right. Please allow me to introduce Peter Oehler.
All right, so thank you for the brief moment of disruption there as we got our technology wheeled out and turned on. We're going to try this as an interactive discussion. With an interactive display, I'm actually going to use the product here as we go. So hopefully you in the back can see what's going on, and if not, we are projecting it as well onto the big screen. I'm really fascinated by the conversations we've been having, the speakers we've had. We started with a kind of a really big picture overview from Rick from Intel that was really interesting, and I'm thinking, oh, we're going in that direction. And then now we're in unmanned vehicles, and then all of a sudden we're in space, and now we're in incredible details on materials for renewable energies. This is a really neat group of speakers, a really neat experience. And so we're going to change gears again, and we're going to look at collaborative computing and the products that can make collaborative computing possible. More perhaps tied back to what Rick was talking about at the very beginning from Intel, but perhaps complementing some of the things we've seen in the last three speeches as well. So, as was just mentioned, this field of large screen interactive display was really brought forward by the founder of Perceptive Pixel, a good friend, Jeff Hahn. In 2006, he was a professor at NYU and had been thinking about human-computer interaction and interfaces for many, many years. And he had not only sort of envisioned a way that we could interact with computing in a much more natural sense, but he had built it. And he had built the hardware and the software and all of the drivers and the whole experience up as one guy in his lab at NYU. And in 2006, he gave a seminal TED Talk on this topic. And, you know, all of you in this room, or many of you in this room, you can reach in your pocket and grab your phone, you can think multi-touch. What's so exciting about that? At this point, multi-touch did not exist as an interface approach at all. It was before iPhone. No one had gotten here. Rick had a really interesting graph that he showed of time, and there was an adoption curve. And his curve sort of looked like that. And he talked about the third industrial revolution we're in now. We can think of any of these technology vectors as sort of following the same very traditional curve. And in multi-touch space, back in the 90s and even the 80s, we were way back here. There were people doing great research on it. And it wasn't until Jeff in 2006 that we kind of hit this point. And then shortly thereafter, iPhone and then the tablets and all the interfaces you're seeing today. So Jeff realized he was onto something. And he very quickly formed a company and he built a team out of other graphics programming researchers he knew in the New York area. And he built product based on this approach. What was pretty exciting for us was at the time in 2008 and then again in 2012, we got some incredible recognition for the work we were doing with John King on CNN. Who was watching the 2012 election coverage on CNN as John King called Ohio for Barack Obama, even though he was like 25 points behind, according to all the polling or all of the results that had come in at that point. For me, I happened to be watching it at that point. He was telling a story dynamically on the air in a way that would not have been possible with traditional technology and traditional software. This was a whole new way of telling a story and a whole new way of reporting a live event. And it was really, really quite exciting for us. If we take a quick look at sort of the technology timeline, and this is the space I could spend 4 hours talking about. I'm going to try to do it in 40 seconds. Each one of these individual buckets is an individual technology or approach we needed to develop in order to develop a successful product, a whole product that delivered on an experience or set of experiences that brought value to a customer. And in time, as we go across, we kept reinventing our approach. So we started with frustrated total internal reflection optical sensing. And we moved that to do that through an LCD, and then we've moved on to projected capacitive sensing. We've reinvented ourselves 3 times in that space. We've reinvented ourselves in the way we think about the display technology that underlines what we're up to as well. We've reinvented the way we process the images and capture the data that we can then use to drive touch. Each one of these is interesting on their own and stands alone. But when you start to put them together and see how they work together, and even going so far as to look at how does the Windows technology that underlies it, that allows us to do something useful with this, how does that grow and evolve? And then you take it all the way down to the most basic level and you say, okay, I got a thing, how do I make it? Very early on, we were doing this in a space about this big, and it was hardware manufacturing, hardware store manufacturing. We'd get an order, we'd run to the hardware store, we'd buy parts. We were really in a prototype factory. As we moved, we built a low-volume factory, and now we've got a high-volume factory right across the freeway. So as you think about, it was Rick again who mentioned that 7% or something like that of Gen Ys will be in Fortune 500 companies to start. So you're all be doing something new and exciting. You'll be looking to take on the world with a startup of your own. It's not any one technology vector that's going to allow you to be successful. It's about finding the right people and the right team and growing that out and solving all the solutions like Ben talked about with the 3D printing. How do I make a 3D printed UAV that really works fantastically? And then I can solve business problems about how to bring that worldwide. We did that in the display market. You'll need to do that in whatever market and product you move yourself to. All of that culminated into a whole series of products, some of which are shown here, from a 27-inch LCD to the world's largest at the time, 82-inch projected capacitive display and sensor. That led us to have an opportunity to look to expand our scope. And in 2012, we went shopping. We went shopping for somebody to buy us. It was a really fantastic time and very exciting. We found Steve Ballmer at Microsoft was a true kindred spirit. He saw what we were doing. He was incredibly excited about it. He not only saw it and bought into it, he literally opened his wallet and spent $120,000 to put one of these displays in his personal office because he thought it was so cool. That was pretty nifty. And then he opened his wallet further, and he, as a company, Microsoft bought and acquired Perceptive Pixel. That enabled us to, for the first time, start thinking about our product in a much more holistic sense. We weren't just doing a piece of hardware with some great applications on it. We could now reach into Windows, and we could now reach into the Office applications you all use every day, and really change the way people work and collaborate in groups. So, as we started to get into this space more deeply and realize Microsoft's desire for scale, desire for the changing of the way people collaborate, people work together, we realized the personal computer was not the right answer to that problem. When you think about your personal computer today, if you had a personal computer in the front of a collaborative workspace or a conference room, it sort of really doesn't fit. It's meant for you as an individual to get work done and be productive and do great things. But when you start to put that in the context of a whole group of people, it really becomes clunky. So we sort of disassembled that and rethought it through. And what we came back to is we wanted to build a product that was fantastic for brainstorming, that enabled people to work as a group productively and in an engaged way really, really quickly. We wanted to make it a great platform for large apps, and we wanted it to fit into the space the spaces that were available. So if we sort of take those apart, Personal computer. You walk up to your personal computer, what's the first thing you see? You see a little graphic right down here on the bottom where it asks you for your username and password. Well, don't want to use that. That's sort of, what do you use when you walk into a conference room? Whose username do you use? Okay, so maybe you've signed in, you've been successful. Now you see a start menu. Well, is that start menu going to be the same in this conference room? Is that conference room? Is that huddle space and team space over there? This is really designed for you as an individual. It's not at all designed for us as a group to be able to access the things that we really want in order to be productive. So that's not a really great solution either. Of course, the worst solution of all is to walk into a conference room and see something that looks like that. It's like, what do you do with that, right? It's just nothing but black. In fact, it's kind of intimidating. It's so darn black. You don't know, how do I turn it on? If I even can turn it on, what do I do then? That's a really awful endpoint for us. So in designing the product, we started with this notion that we wanted it to be really super easy to walk up and use, really incredibly approachable. We wanted to eliminate username and password. We wanted to make the functions of it super discoverable and really easy. So we've simplified the start menu. We've eliminated authentication. We've gotten you back to this one screen. It will turn itself on as it recognizes your presence, turn itself off when you're not there to save energy. But when you're there, it's ready for you. Really simple, really clean, really fantastic. What's neat about this to me, having been part of it now for the last few years, is this is a whole brand new version of Microsoft Windows. This is not a pretty little shell on top of Windows, and hiding below this is just the normal everyday Windows. This is a rethinking of how Windows works for groups and for collaboration. And that's not something we could have done as Perceptive Pixel, but it's absolutely something we can do now as part of the larger program. For group collaboration, one of the things we do so much of is whiteboarding. We just get together and we throw ideas on the board and we build on those ideas and build on each other. In fact, in this room, there's one right behind the screen here, there's another one back over there. How much time do you spend every day in front of a whiteboard, standing shoulder to shoulder with a colleague or a friend, working through something? I do it all the time. I love that approach. Problem with it is you end up having to erase it if you're leaving a shared space. If you're in your own space, before you know it, your whiteboard is completely covered with stuff and there's no more room for you to do anything. So how do we take that incredibly rich, powerful collaboration experience of the digital whiteboard, or of the whiteboard, and make it digital? How do we make that power and extend it out in a very digital way? For us, it starts with having a marker, a very traditional instrument. We're not drawing with finger paint anymore. We're not kindergartners. We have a tool to do this. So by bringing the ink straight to the front, by making a natural experience, you don't really even have to think about using it. You pick the pen up and you can start inking straight away. It's just fantastic. You can add to that the ability to pull in content from anywhere, to save it and share it out. You can even rehydrate that content. So if we're having a conversation and 2 days later we come back to that same conversation, we pull up that whiteboard and start going just where we left off the last time. That's exciting and fast. All of this only works because the interface is so smooth and easy that you don't have to, you're not thinking about it. There's really no friction in it. The other piece that I really love is we've got great ways to bring your content from whatever device you have all the way up to the big screen. So, you think about the problem with you walk into a conference room and how do I throw my data onto that projector? There's a projector here. We were talking about how to get data from here to there to there. Oh my God, how many cables do you need? What is it, HDMI? Is it DisplayPort? Is it VGA? Where are the adapters? Oh my God, that's too complicated. Here, just look over my shoulder. It's right here on my little display. That's an awful experience when you get to it. So instead, we've kind of rebuilt this experience from the ground up, and I can now take my phone and I can project wirelessly from my phone to this display. I don't need to be logged onto any network. This and this, establish a connection, they talk, they go. I can do that from an Android tablet. I can do that from a Google phone. I can do that from any Windows 10 laptop. Super clean and easy. And once you've done it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the way this is supposed to work. This is fantastic. The thing we added on top of that I really, really love is an ability to then interact with the big screen like it's your screen or an extension of it. So when I ink on the big screen or I touch the big screen, it's actually driving my phone or driving my Surface tablet or your Android tablet or whatever else you've got. So it becomes incredibly natural. We're sort of gifted in our factory across the street. We have these displays everywhere, so we really get used to using them, touching, working, feeling, interacting, and you go to a place that doesn't have that. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go up and I want to advance the slide by touching the screen. And all I do is leave a fingerprint. So this notion of natural interaction, it really becomes part of you really, really quick. The next space that we wanted to really rethink was the remote collaboration meeting. So roughly 50% of all meetings today have remote participants. Maybe they're down the hall or maybe they're across the world, but they're coming out of a small little telephone box in the middle of the table. Took you too long to figure out what number do I dial, what's my password, crap, how do I get them connected? You finally got them connected, the voice didn't sound very good, they couldn't hear you, you couldn't hear them. That's an awful experience. If you've had the experience of doing that in a video conference, it can even be worse. There are some very, very expensive and fantastic rooms that'll do this in a rich collaborative way, but they're few and far between. We wanted to democratize that, really bring that to the masses. We wanted to make that remote experience a first-class experience, not somebody on the other end who doesn't feel like they're actually there and is very quickly disengaged. We did that in a whole bunch of ways. Probably the first and most important way was going back to the Skype team and working with them to really optimize their software experience for this product and the experiences we were going after. We did things simply like, instead of the camera being placed up here at the top center, where you normally find it in a phone or a laptop, this position is not a terribly good position from the remote side. It's kind of too high. It's dead centered. I think of this as sort of the eye of God view. It's not a really great view. And for many guys, if I happen to be standing here, capturing that thinning hair in the back of my head is maybe not my most flattering position. So by taking that camera and bringing it down and around to the side, I can put it at eye level. So that remote person feels much more naturally engaged in the room. By doing that, I can also then choose to dock the Skype gallery view right next to the camera. And what this allows me to do is have an engaged conversation. So we're talking to each other. We're having a great, this is how people talk, right? We don't talk by this. I'm talking to you now, but I'm looking up there. That's what a normal remote collaboration video call is like. It's like you're not locked in and having eye contact with the person on the opposite side. By doing something super simple, like just bringing that gallery view down and around next to the camera, we can bring that gaze awareness straight up to the top and make that experience much richer and deeper on the remote side. Of course, great speakers, awesome micro technology from Connect built in the top, so you could hear somebody like me talking loud at the front of the room, and you could also hear somebody quiet from the back of the room. You don't have any of these problems with, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, can you say that again? This just works. It's also an incredible platform for large screen apps. You heard lots of discussions about data and big data and data analysis today. There's no better way to analyze big data than on a big screen that's interactive in a really natural way. So you could throw Power BI and all of the big data analytics that Microsoft creates on here, or you could do something as simple as a search through a map and try to find that place you grew up in. Where did I grow up? I grew up right there on Bonnie Drive, and this was the little pond we used to swim at. I mean, you can tell such great stories and get so deep into the analysis, you very quickly forget about the interface you're working on. And it's all about the size and the rich interactivity. This is something you've got to try and experience for yourself. So I would ask that at the very end of today's session, when folks are mingling and maybe we're off having lunch, I'll get plugged back in and set back up again and come up and try it and see for yourself how analyzing a large data set, experiencing CAD at this scale and at this size, and how easy it is to maneuver around three-dimensional objects and information at this scale in this way really is. You know, thinking about the chemical analysis and how do I understand how molecules are structured in a crystal lattice. Holy cow. I mean, some of that, you can probably do that in your head, but there's not that many people who can do that, and being able to visualize that in an incredibly rich way is very, very powerful. Okay. One of the things that's super important to me is in a conversation like this is you can often feel like, okay, I've just told you about all these challenges we've solved. We must be done. We're not done. This is really just the beginning of quite a nascent market. There are so many more things that we've got to solve. So I'm going to leave you with 3 individual challenges. These are big things we're wrestling with right now that we don't have great solutions for. The first one is to think about content and security. If this is a communal device you never log into, but you've got information you want to share, how do you most quickly get to that information in a way that is safe, that is respectful of your privacy, And that doesn't allow you to compromise the security of that information. That could be your own personal information, or it could be your company's information. So there's some ways we can think about doing that. We're seeing biometrics rise really nicely on phones. Any of you with an iPhone or many Google phones use your fingerprint to log in right now. My Microsoft phone allows me to look at, it scans my iris. It does an iris scan to log me in. My computer, my Surface, logs me in with facial recognition. I love that. Rick talked about facial recognition plus voice, even better, fantastic. All of those rely on that data being resident on the local device. How many of you want your facial data stored in the cloud somewhere that you have no idea where it is, or your fingerprint, or your iris scan, or your voice print? Holy cow, that starts to get weird and scary. What are the ethical implications of thinking about doing that? How does that all work? Big, interesting, open question. Next question. How do we manage interfaces at scale? And by scale, in this case, I mean size. If we think about a traditional office application, or virtually any large screen computer application, the UX, all of the user interface and user experience elements are wrapped around the outside of the window, and the content is centered in the middle of it. This works great if it's a 24-inch display on your desk and you got a mouse to drive around and you're doing a little keyboard thing. But on a display of this scale, I've actually got to walk back and forth to expand it out, and files save, and okay, now where's the zoom? I mean, you're doing an aerobic exercise in this case to do it. And you can only do that if you're the only one using it. The beauty of a device of this size, though, is that two of us can stand shoulder to shoulder, even three, shoulder to shoulder working on it. A personal computer, or even the collaborator computer we built right now, is not great at managing multiple focuses at the same time. If you're looking at a map and I'm working on a whiteboard, the minute you touch the map, it gains focus, and I lose focus on the whiteboard, and then back and forth, and we play ping pong. That's an awful experience. It's not the way you want it to work. Works perfectly in the sense of a personal computer, where you're only thinking about one thing at a time. But it doesn't work great when you have multiple minds sharing the same compute space. Expand that out then again. What if I had another one of these right here, and a third, and a fourth? How can they all know about each other and all work together in a beautiful way? Some of the ways we think about doing this are with proximal UI. Maybe when I get close to the display, it knows I'm there, I take my pen out, I put it up against it, and it brings up a menu that's context sensitive to what it is that thinks I want to be doing right then. Fantastic approach. The interesting part of something like that, none of you use this kind of thing right now, right? You're used to this interface. So how do we leverage the power of the interface you know and love? How often do you update, say, Excel or PowerPoint? Then you curse Microsoft. Damn you, Redmond, you moved the place how do I change the second axis? Oh my, and that's awful, right? And it's just a really simple thing to just change how you add the secondary axis to a chart. If we go and completely rethink this interface you've spent your lives learning and understanding and getting super proficient at, and we try to go somewhere new, what does that do to us? Okay, last question. Is one of smart devices and the proliferation of smart devices and IoT. I have a colleague up in Redmond in the Microsoft Research Group, Bill Buxton, who supposes that this proliferation of smart devices will cause us to completely grind to a halt. Because the exponential growth that Rick talked about early on is creating so many different standards and so many different ways of doing things. And your data it's in the Apple cloud at iTunes, it's at Google, it's in the Microsoft cloud, it's in the Amazon cloud. Oh my God, it's everywhere. I got stuff on Dropbox, I got other things going on in Slack. So many different devices, so many different scenarios. And now I'm just going to keep adding to that with new IoT devices, smart home devices, all this. How do I make sense out of this gigantic soup of information and bring it back in a way that allows us to create standards, to work together, to gain power from each new device and data stream we get, rather than becoming more and more confused about each one? This is a piece of that, and I think about this from how do I get my content from my Apple Watch up to this display, or what can I do with a watch that would really be delightful? If I've got my Microsoft band and the Microsoft band knows who I am and it's connected my identity to the band, can I just use the band to log myself in? There's sort of all these interesting questions about how do all these pieces fit together. The problem can be really simple about how do I work at it with a Surface Hub or its future products, but it's also a really broad question about how do we make sense out of this new world where the proliferation of smart devices is just ever increasing. So, with all of that, I think I got it all into 15 minutes. I'm kind of excited about that. Thank you for your time. Do I have time to have questions? No. Okay. That was very well not said. At the end of the session, I'll plug myself back in, and I've encouraged any and all of you to come on up and play with the device. I've got a bunch of different applications and things you can try to experience it. There's something about getting up and touching and working with the system that makes it really quite real and remarkable and magical. So please come join me at the very end of the session. Thank you.